Hi, I'm Andy Schmuckler, and I give a whole lot of thought to the psychology of what's been going on in conservative America, not just under Trump, but actually going back a little over 30 years, because I've been in a position I live among conservative rural America in the Shenandoah Valley. I did talk radio conversations with conservatives for a decade, lots of hours talking about a lot of meaningful things. I've watched them change in a way that I never would have thought that was possible. So that they support things which are just the opposite of values that they sincerely express. I've just been astonished by it, and I think about this stuff all the time about how does it work that this can happen, that what we see among the people who support Donald Trump, what we can see about what they think and what they feel and how they got from there to here. And I won't bother to give a lot of credential, but let's just say that I have a lot of background of a psychological sort, suitable for speculating about it. Given that credential and given the fact that I think that about that transformation a whole lot, I also really confess that this is just speculation, and I remain somewhat mystified. And I have a history of being sometimes wrong in that I've consistently been over optimistic about how much power the good has in their political lives. And I didn't think they would support Trump when he became the nominee, not the good people. I didn't think that they would support Trump after an insurrection. I mean, I didn't think they'd support him after Access Hollywood. So I don't claim to know the answer to all the questions. But I do think I can go into one dimension of this, at least, and raise some interesting questions and give some speculation. And that's got to do with the people who were the insurrectionists on January 6th and what their psychology was. And I'm imagining that there was a small group of people who knew that the big lie was not true. I'm imagining, and I could be wrong about this, it doesn't matter for what we get to. I'm imagining that like the militias, Proud Boys, and that they didn't care whether the election had been stolen, that they are such gangsters at heart in some way, that they were willing to use that Trump lie about the election being stolen as an excuse to gather an army and try to overthrow the American government. But I think that that's probably a small sliver. There was testimony at the January 6th congressional hearings from some people who actually really did believe that the election had been stolen for Donald Trump. And they thought that they were being brave patriots in refusing to let the government be stolen by the other guys. And they are people that raise one of those sort of amazing flags about, how does that happen? What I like about this particular group is not only did they believe the big lie, but they believed it with such conviction that they were willing to go to Washington where it will be wild to act on the basis of the belief that the election had been stolen. So I'm talking about that group of people, and I don't know how many of them there were, but I'm going to venture that was more than half the people there really did think that the election had been stolen for Donald Trump, and really did think that they were showing courage and patriotism by attacking the Capitol to prevent them from ratifying that theft of the big steal. Now, I tend to think, and I think all of us probably do, I tend to think that we human beings are more or less like me. And I put myself in the position of, we all were in the position of knowing whether the election had been stolen. I mean, there was no question but that Trump had decided months before that if he was going to lose, which the polls indicated pretty strongly he was going to falsely claim that the election had been stolen. He went through, a whole lot of charades and stuff like that, shedding doubt and this rigged and mail-in ballots and all that stuff that he was complete falsehoods. He was preparing the way. Didn't they see that he was doing that? I mean, they're followers of Trump. Presumably they're paying attention, and wasn't it transparent? So one encounters at that point the psychological question. Okay, so if they didn't see that, what kind of state of consciousness were they in not to see how he was preparing to do what he did? It didn't seem that hidden to me. So I then start to think there's something going on where they're not seeing things. And I don't know quite what it is. It could be that they see those things, but they've turned off their ability to do critical thinking. And that there's some kind of attachment to whatever Donald Trump says, that trumps what intelligence would tell them the evidence shows. Well, there's something going on there between them and Trump, I think, that's alien to me. I do think that people get into strange relationships with leaders, cult, there's something that happens sometimes between people and the leader that, in a sense, interferes with the kind of cognitive processes that allow you to see what's obvious if the leader doesn't want you to see it that way. I don't know that experience from the inside, but I sort of can imagine from what we've seen about relationships between cult followers and leaders, like those people in Nuremberg Square. I don't know exactly what frame of mind those people were in with their Sieg Heils and the rapture around Hitler and his ugliness how did that happen? But I grew up seeing that it did happen, but I don't necessarily quite get how the leader gets that much power over people. But somehow the people who were there insurrecting to overthrow the and as they would see it, to undo the theft of the election. this is a frame of mind that might be good to understand, because one of the things we need to do is, well, I don't know what I need to do. I mean, Trump's going to die, probably, within 10 years. I mean, he's pretty strong looking to me, but he's going to disappear. But something happened in people's minds that was inconsistent with the well-being of a democracy, that they turned off their intelligence and maybe some other stuff too, of a moral sort, in order to maintain the relationship with the leader. And that proves very dangerous when that happens, and we're paying a big price. So how do you deal with the people out there who got led into a frame of mind that made them allies to a force that wanted to destroy American democracy? Don't know. But the people who were there for the insurrection are showing us something. I don't think those people are unintelligent. If you're making a decision to go to Washington to overturn the big steal, what was the process that made you that sure that Trump was telling the truth? And it becomes even more bizarre when you think about how anybody with a head on their shoulders and eyes that could see would know that Trump was a prodigious liar. It wasn't like like the big lie was the first lie he had ever told. We've never had a president who was just so consistently saying things that were obviously not true. The Washington Post counted up 30,000 lies. So what is the frame of mind that will allow an intelligent person, and I do think that these are intelligent people with adequate intelligence, believe something against all the evidence, and it leads them to have a destructive role on the American body politic. And what was it in the American people that we could have tens of millions of people who would vote for a candidate who was so obviously everything any decent person would not want to have be president? His every action, his every utterance shows that this is not a good person, not a person who's having a benign effect on the world. It would have taken, for anybody who voted for Trump, it would have taken an extraordinary amount of ignorance or something weirder than that not to know that he's about as not the one you want as it could possibly be. I mean, this is a guy who manifests blatantly. If you made a list of the main human character defects, I don't think you could easily find somebody who had more serious, deep defects in each of the categories. He's greedy. He's a bully. He's sadistic. He's a completely unreliable person. He's completely selfish. And the evidence for all these things is abundant. The evidence that the election was free and fair was abundant. Mountains and mountains of evidence. Trump is so obviously not who you should choose that I believe sincerely that it would be difficult to find anybody in a phone book of any city. It would be hard to find somebody who would have a more destructive effect if given the presidency. Trump has a lot of skills, like getting that kind of support from people, an extraordinary achievement. So even if there are people out there that are just as evil as Trump, not very many of them will be just as evil as Trump and just as capable of having a big impact on the world. I mean, look at the impact this guy is having. Just look at the war in Iraq, in Ukraine right now, and the impact it is that these people chose him. At every place you look, it is obviously a catastrophe, but it's no surprise. I mean, it's surprising to me to see, like, who knew it was going to look like this over the first month? But the idea that this was going to be catastrophic, well, I wrote that in my weekly message to the conservatives. I mean, it was obviously it was going to be catastrophic. You just look at everything he did, whether it's lies about Haitian immigrants to make people hate more, or lies about a pandemic to not take responsibility for the need to take care of the American people. Oh, there's just an endless line of evidence that this guy is exactly what you don't want, and that he's going to be catastrophic. And yet they made that choice. And part of it is there's a relationship there. After the insurrection, you may remember, and here's another point where we can see something about the psychology that we're trying to understand. After the insurrection, the Republican leaders like McConnell and what's his name, McCarthy in the House, they were out there talking about that like Trump. They were ready to toss Trump onto the ash heap of history, rejecting him. They never wanted to be subordinated to him anyway. But here they assumed that the Trump following was going to abandon him now that he has basically been a traitor, not in the constitutional definition, but we have a sense of what the betrayal of the nation looks like. He betrayed the nation. That's treason in a non-legal sense, but in terms of the spirit. And in every juncture, he sacrificed American national. He was a traitor. What do you think it would mean that the biggest enemy of America, Putin in Russia back in 2015, 2016, was working to make this guy president? What does it tell you? Well, I don't know. These people still think that they're patriots, and yet they don't draw the obvious conclusion from it just right sitting there. First of all the evidence that Putin wanted Trump, whether there's collusion or not, of course there was collusion. We saw it actually being acted out. Russia, if you're listening, of course there was collusion. What is the psychology of people who are intelligent? I'm going to insist on that. Who see the evidence that the Russians tried to help Trump in the election. I don't know, but I really do wonder whether that help was made the difference between Trump winning or Hillary Clinton defeating him. I don't know if it matters, but it's conceivable that Putin made Trump president. What is the psychology of somebody who probably, if you're talking to them about some video game or some intrigue of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy, some intelligence to see a world, don't see that there's something here between Trump and Putin that tells you that this is not what a patriot is supposed to support. Putin clearly, if you know anything, you know he wishes this nation ill. He wants to be big like the Soviet Union was, and he wants to bring America down. If you don't know that, well, yeah, well, how much do you need to know to know basically that he's an enemy of the United States, and to know at the same time that he wanted Trump to be president, and to draw the obvious inference? Can it be good for the country to have a president that its enemies would choose? Anybody that understands a Tolkien world could certainly draw the conclusions. Game of Thrones, what's happened to the intelligence, and how can it be undone? And let me close by saying something much more general. I think that the pro-democracy world, the liberal world, the world of the Democratic Party, has shown so little interest in understanding and fighting for the hearts and minds of the people on the other side. I encountered this back in the early 90s. When I dealt with liberal gatekeepers about what Limbaugh was doing to the minds of the people, his 20 million ditto heads, and the poisoning of the American mind was something we had to pay attention to, and these liberal gatekeepers who controlled what did or did not happen on their radio stations said that Rush Limbaugh's audience is not our concern. And I've been struck continually since then by how little interest there has been among the good guys as that conservative America turned decent people into bad guys, or at least supporters of bad guys. I know that we have a real political emergency right now, that Trump is, because all these people got to wherever they got to in their heads and chose the worst conceivable president who's now taking a wrecking ball to almost everything. Because we've got that president, we've got a need to take the actions that we can to prevent this wrecking ball from succeeding at wrecking as much as it would if it doesn't get defeated, or at least slowed down, or at least somewhat crippled. So I know we've got that emergency, and I myself am working on that. I have one entryway into where something might be accomplished. So I've supplied some thoughts for fighting the immediate fight that we need to fight, because they've got so much power right now. we've got to summon up as much power as possible of all whatever kinds are available to us. Like the town hall down in Georgia, where we manifested the power of a very unhappy public as represented. It's probably sample, but they get to represent the constituency of this Republican congressman who won by 30% the last time around in this very red district. But to be confronted by people saying, why aren't you standing up? So there's all kinds of ways available to exercise power. It's certainly not the hand we wanted to have going into the election. We wanted to have a decent person, Kamala Harris, wielding the powers of the presidency, working toward accomplishing the good things that she would have tried to accomplish. We would have liked that. But America made the worst possible choice of a huge possible consequence back on election day. And we did it because roughly half of the American people were in a state of knowledge or ignorance or values or lack of values or whatever the state was, that they could choose what was obviously the opposite of what you would want. There was some guy who liked the line. I heard a guy say, I'd vote for Joe Biden. This is before Biden withdrew. I'd vote for Joe Biden even if he were dead. And that articulated really what was obviously true. Anything but Trump. You don't need to make a huge case in view of the realities. You don't have to make a huge case of this candidate is wonderful or isn't wonderful, or Biden senile is not as dangerous as Trump in any form. Obvious. We will eventually have a world that's free of Trump. Now, things do happen when a leader that made people crazy dies, but I have no idea what would happen here. What halt of Trump after Trump died, but in any event, even if Trump isn't on the scene, if we try to understand the psychology that made that possible, and the psychology that made it possible for people who had been sane, reasonable, decent, patriotic, conservative Americans to move over time into becoming people who would support something that was in almost every imaginable way what they would have called evil before the transformation. I don't think we can assume that this insanity, or whatever word we use for somebody who can't see what's obviously true right in front of their eyes, and who support something which is the opposite of the values they believe that they hold, without seeing the contradiction. Whatever you want to call that, I think there is craziness in all this, and that's something that I've wrestled to understand. Again, I don't fully understand what we're looking at, but I do think we need to look at it, because even without Trump on the scene, something happened to these people that made them kind of crazy. and not the kind of citizens that are consistent to have and maintain the health of your democracy. As we can see, when right now the force of fascism is working, it got elected, it got the power to turn this into a fascist regime of some sort. And it got immediately to work with at an accelerated rate. There is a problem in America at a deeper level than the immediate crisis. We have to prevent fascism from making us into what it's trying to make us into. But the long term problem has to do with the psychological health of the American people taken as an altogether. I mean, we can afford a certain amount of craziness. In the America I grew up in, we had groups on the radical right, like the John Birch Society and a few other things. I studied when I was in college in the 60s. The kind of people who believed that rock and roll was a part of a communist plot to corrupt the American youth by awakening their animal instincts. That kind of craziness. That was, I don't know, maybe like 4% of the American people were that crazy. Anybody who voted for Donald Trump was either ignorant or really out of touch with reality. I don't think ignorance was the cause of much of it. There was too much that was too obviously true. There's some kind of lack of integrity in the process of judging what the truth is. So, with that lack of integrity, somebody can become so convinced that the election was stolen from Donald Trump, in spite of there being no evidence to support that and being a mountain of evidence to refute it, so convinced nonetheless that they would take this major action of going to Washington to be summoned by Trump to make things wild. Yeah, human consciousness is a huge thing. I mean, it's hard to come up with a psychology which does justice to all the spaces that it seems that human beings can get into. I've worked at understanding, little glimmers of could be this way and that way. But there's a way in which the people who have taken that trip into that crazy Trump world, there's a way in which that is a spiritually profound set of commitments of what to see and not to see, what to think and not to think, what to support and what not to support, that adds up to something that's very broken. And how do you make it whole? We have postponed on the liberal side dealing with what was happening to these people for 30 years, since the rise of Gingrich and Limbaugh. We have left them to the mercies of the propagandists on the right, who did a marvelous job of taking decent people and making them supporters of something like Donald Trump and the fascist force he represents. This is not the frame of mind in which these people supported Ronald Reagan. It would have been good to have fought for their hearts and minds, but it is not too late to do it now. And that requires trying to understand where are they? What and how do we get through where they are, to bring intelligent people back to a recognition of the truth, and to awaken their real goodness to govern their political choices rather than letting the opposite somehow possess the part of them that operates in the political realm. Whatever you want to call it. I mean, we don't have great language to understand the range of consciousness that the human being can be turned into. We have words like brainwashing, which I guess actually refers to something that was done to American soldiers during the Korean War? Is that where, the Manchurian candidate kind of a thing? But something like brainwashing seems to have been a reality. That. What's hypnosis? There are states of consciousness that show us that this instrument of consciousness that we have can take a whole lot of different forms. And we're dealing now with a Trump supporting world, or that half of America that voted for Trump. With it being clear that we now need to be seeking for ways of bringing them back in touch with reality and back in touch with their decent values. How did they get from being the good people who are like Ronald Reagan's supporters into being the supporters of Donald Trump? It's not like it's going to be obvious how to get them back. But we don't even ask that question. The liberal pro-democracy world doesn't ask many questions at all about what's going on the other side. Now, after we lost this election, people were big on looking at the Democrats, what they did wrong and what Kamala did, and Joe Biden that. And of course, you can look at but the point isn't that the Democrats didn't win. The real point is that the American people didn't make the so obviously right choice. That's where the problem lies. In that part of America that voted for Donald Trump, there's a problem. We need to understand that problem, and then we got to do our best to address it. The political health of the nation depends on people being in a less broken place than the folks that voted for Donald Trump. So we got work to do. And even as we're fighting the immediate battle, I think it behooves us to also look at this long-term thing we need to do about how do you build a people back into a form where they're worthy of democracy. I mean, right now, we can't trust the American people to make a decent choice. That's not good. But we got no alternative but to try to work on America so that we can have confidence, which I think was warranted in, say, the 50s. We could have confidence that the American people would go on an election day, would go and vote for at least a decent choice. The American people have to be the foundation of our democracy. Right now, we have a defective people that can't be trusted to do what needs to be done. So transforming the American people, we ignored the transformation that took place over 30 years. But we got no choice but to try to work for the transformation we need over the next generation. Thank you. I'm Andy Schmuckler. Please subscribe if you're interested. Please go to my website where I have an integrated picture of what our situation is as human beings on this planet, and as Americans in particular. So please go to a betterhumanstory.org if you're interested in seeing such an integrated picture. I don't think you'd be disappointed if you want that to kind of make sense of a lot of stuff, the kind of big picture. I don't think you'll be disappointed. But if that isn't your cup of tea, well, there are a lot of specific, there's a particular portal called Messages to the Conservatives, which operates at the level of my effort to address these people, which I do on a weekly basis and have for over a decade. And I was a Democratic nominee for Congress here in 2012. And so I've been reaching out to them in various ways, and I don't know how to get through. Maybe I get through some, maybe I don't get through at all, but there's an imperviousness in this world. So I don't claim that there's any kind of instant cure. I haven't come up with a cure, but I think we at least need to take on the task. And we have not done so nearly enough over the last 30 years. Thanks. Bye-bye.